All right. I'm here with Brittany Long. Brittany is one of my best friends in the whole world, and I want to talk to her about making a shift from where you are to where you want to be. And Brittany is, I would say, without a doubt, the number one person in my life that I've seen do that. And she has never given up on herself, and it's been such a transformation, just an absolutely jaw-dropping transformation. Some of you have met Brittany before, some of you are new to her story. So we're gonna kind of start from the very beginning. Thanks for being here, Brittany, by the way.
Yeah, always.
So the first question I want to ask you is, and we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty. We're gonna talk about like action steps in terms of mindset and what specific shifts you made and all that. But set the stage for us. Who were you back when we first met? Because we met in like 2012, I think. It's a long time
Yeah,
ago.
so when we I know, right? So when we met, I was teaching. Actually, I think it was maybe even before I was teaching, but I think it was when I was working at my alma mater. Didn't love it. I was doing photography on the side, just trying to like figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I knew that what I was doing was not what I wanted to be doing. I eventually went into teaching. That was not what I wanted to be doing either. But we met then, and I remember feeling like I just didn't have any options. There's nothing else for me to do. And this lie, I think it's a lie, that I was told in college, which was, you just get a degree and then all these doors are going to open up for you and you're going to be so ready to go anywhere you want to go and do anything you want to do. And then I got out of college and I was like, crap, this is not
It is a
what I
lie.
expected.
I agree with you. It's a total lie. It's a scam for many people. Not for
Yeah.
everybody, but for many people, it's a scam.
Yeah, I agree. And so I realized I have to do something different. So I had started teaching and I taught for 2 years and then I had a cancer scare, realized I can't keep doing this. This is not, it's a great career for some people. It was not what I wanted to be doing. And I stayed stuck for about 2 years and I was just like complaining and whining about it and being frustrated and feeling like I had no other option. And I think that's really when our paths probably crossed was around that time. I think I had just left my alma mater, had been teaching for a year or two, and then I think that's kind of when we met.
And then what happened?
So we had the Orlando marketer gatherings where, we would meet up and there'd be other people in business and stuff that was there. And I started going, and I'm pretty sure I started going, Caitlin, because you had invited me. And I remember feeling so out of place, like a fish out of water there, because I felt like everybody that was there was like crushing it in their business and even had a business. I didn't have a business. But I kept going because I thought, well, they must know something that I don't. And I'd rather be around more people like this than just, sitting in the teacher's lounge and complaining and stuff, which is what I was currently doing. And so I thought there has to be something more. I kept going. It was like an hour and a half. I don't like round or not round trip. It was a 3 hour round trip and it was on a school night, which if you are listening and you're a teacher, you know how tired you are then. But I was like, I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep on going. And I remember one day that I was kind of complaining and I realized, okay, nobody else in this room is complaining like I'm complaining. Nobody else in this room is saying like, "Oh, poor me, I'm doing this and I hate it." They're coming up with solutions. They're figuring out what to do next. Maybe I could do that too. And we have a mutual friend, Brad, and I was talking to him one day at the gathering, and I remember saying something about how much I hated teaching, and he was like, "Well, Brittany, nobody's forcing you to stay." And I remember being so pissed about that because I was like, "How dare you? Like, you don't know what it's like. You don't know, how challenging it would be for me. You don't know that I can't just leave." Like all these things that I've been telling myself. And he's like, "Well, nobody's forcing you to stay." And I realized after I let my my annoyance settle a little, I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's right." And that was one of those pivoting moments for me where I thought, okay, so if I don't have to stay, what am I going to do? And I thought, all right, I'm going to stay for the rest of this year, but I'm going to figure out what happens next. And that is when I actually started with your program with mindset. And that is what skyrocketed everything from there.
Man, this gives me chills to hear you speak it and to hear you say that you realized that you were lying to yourself and to hear you admit that you got mad at our friend Brad for
And I
telling
love Brad.
you.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
But this time I was mad.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And it happens a lot. I mean, even in my emails and in DMs and stuff, people are just, I wouldn't say that anybody's necessarily gotten mad. Okay, yeah, they have over the years for sure. Not everybody can do what you're doing, Caitlin. And I think people forget and they see me now and they see you now, and they're like, oh, well, it's easy for you to say, Brittany. Does that happen to you now? Where it's like, oh, it's easy for you, you're successful.
Yeah, every once in a while that'll happen. Not too much, but yeah, every once in a while somebody will email me. Like I remember one time when for one of the brands we have, Life After Teaching, somebody responded back and they're like, "How did like I can't believe this girl is trying to sell teachers things and blah blah blah." And like, of course you can do it because your husband must have good insurance or whatever. And I'm like, well, that's not the case because we have our own insurance. And like, I think a lot of times people kind of assume things because it's easier to, at least in my experience and for myself, it was easier to say, well, that must be nice. You must be able to do it because of X, Y, and Z. I could never do it because here's all the limitations that I have. It was much easier for me to say that and to think that than to put it back on myself and be like, all right, but what am I doing? What am I doing to make the positive change that I want to see? Even if it's something small. Most of the time, like if I could spend the same amount of time actually taking action on what I wanted versus complaining about how much I didn't want to be a teacher anymore, I suddenly had a lot more time to get things done that I wanted to get done. But yeah, every once in a while I'll hear that. And I get it. I get where people are coming from. It's I've been there too, but it doesn't really help you at all to think, oh, that must be nice for this person. So instead, I started thinking, all right, if they can do something like this, I can do something like this. And seeing you, Caitlin, do what you were doing and like talk about what you were doing, I was like, all right, this is a normal person like me. If she can do it, I can do it. And it was really inspiring to me.
Yeah, because when we met, I was a personal trainer and I didn't like it. I didn't like
Yeah.
it. And I think I was doing proofreading too at the time, but I would say I wasn't aware, but I secretly didn't like that either. I was good at it and it was nice to make money with it. That was good, but it stressed me out after a while. And I was like thinking about how it felt to feel like, oh man, I might have to do this for the rest of my life. Kind of like the way I felt when I was at my first and only corporate, not really corporate, but small business job working at a desk. I was like, how am I going to get out of this? Like, oh my gosh, I really don't like this, but I feel like I can't admit it to anyone because that makes me a bad person. All these stories that we tell ourselves. And then, I mean, I got fired, so I kind of had to stop doing that. But yeah, I can remember thinking I was never going to make more than $4,000 in a month, and that 4,000 was a good month. 5,000 was a really good month, but it was a really stressful month because you were exchanging, not reading per page when I was a proofreader. So it wasn't time for money necessarily, but it still hinged on how much I could do and what I was charging. There wasn't a really good value exchange there that felt sustainable for me. Like, could I really do just this until I'm 80? Do I really want to be doing this until I'm 80? No. Is there more out there for me? And I honestly didn't know that there was when I started Proofread Anywhere. I thought it was going to fail. I thought I would fail, not it was going to fail. I was like, nobody wants to know this. Nobody wants to learn this. And especially like not for me. And I was like, oh, it's just boring. Like nobody really cares, blah, blah, blah. Well, people cared. And it became this snowball that was becoming too big even for me to handle. And now I can look back and recognize that so much of the stress that led to the burnout and the depression and all those symptoms that I experienced after the divorce, especially back in 2018 till at least 2021, late 2021, where I was just trying to fit myself into a box that I didn't want to be in anymore and complaining about it. And just like, but it's like the same monster will come and visit us with a different mask on. So it's hard to see that when you're in it, of course. And of course, as I share with the audience a lot of times as well, especially on the podcast, the brain, if it's not functioning properly, it's not going to give you the right thoughts. So that's where things like diet and movement, all those things can really make a difference and how we're able to perceive our thoughts and our brain is doing the thinking, right? So if we have a brain that's not functioning properly, how can we receive information and transmit it accurately? We can't. That just makes total sense. And that's like a huge missing piece with mindset. And you've made a lot of changes in your health over the years too. Can you tell us a little about that and how you've seen that shift your life as well?
Yeah, so I was kind of forced into making some health changes. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and I think it was like 2018 maybe, and that was shocking to me because I wasn't that old. I was I think 32, 31, and I thought, okay, my dad has diabetes, my grandma has diabetes, but they developed it much later in life, and I thought I'm not going to go down this path the rest of my life. When I first found out about it, I cried on the phone. And it was with my gynecologist, and she was like, listen, if you want to, you can beat this. And just hearing someone say that, it gave me hope that that was possible. And I'm so glad I heard that from her first, because the next doctor I visited said, no, your goal, I told him everything I changed. I was going plant-based, I was doing all these things, I was moving more. And he was like, no, your goal should not to, it should be to not be blind and amputated in 10 years. And I was like, well, first of all, I'm finding a new doctor. But second, that anger that I felt from that, like, how dare you? And so it almost became like this personal vendetta where I was like, I'm gonna show him, and I will probably never meet him again, but just that idea that there's someone out there that thinks that that should be my goal. Screw that. I'm absolutely not. And so I made a lot of changes. I started being more intentional about how I was eating, how I was moving, how I was sleeping. I went from sleeping like, I don't know, 3 to 5 hours a night to now I sleep 7 to 9 hours. I drink a lot of water. I eat much better. I try to focus on how does my body feel when I eat certain things versus instead of how I used to focus on like weight loss and stuff like that. I'm like, not even thinking about that. I just want to focus on how can I make my body feel as good as possible for as long as possible. And I've noticed that it's impacted not only my health and how I feel physically, but also how I'm able to show up mentally and emotionally as well. And so I made it part of my like mental health plan of when I find myself struggling in my business, when I find myself struggling with relationships or financially or anything, I start with doing some kind of movement for 5 minutes. That's it. 5 minutes. I'm like, I can do anything for 5 minutes. And so if I do that, I'm able to kind of pull myself out of whatever funk I'm in. And for me, it really starts with moving.
Yeah, changing state, getting stagnant energy moving again. And that's why when I built the van, I put room specifically to store a mini trampoline because that's such a good thing for your lymphatic system, just to get everything moving, shaking, circulating. It's good for your muscles. That's one of my favorite ways to exercise. And I can always convince myself to do it just a little bit every day. Sometimes it's hard if it's raining outside and I have to go outside the van. So I don't always do it, but I know it's like I don't have an excuse, and I always am gonna feel better. And I think there's a lot of limiting programming that can it's almost like an imprint in our brain that even though we've made new choices, got new results, and we know that this mindset stuff actually works, and then we can make these shifts, and it takes practice, and we've done the practice, that we still kind of have those I guess you can call them like scars. I want to say like micro traumas from the way that we've beat ourselves up in the past that can still come and remind us, or we can get stuck into thinking that we haven't changed at all because we were so addicted to feeling bad for so long
Mhm.
in many cases. And that's our normal. Our normal was feeling bad. I can remember being in the throes of burnout slash extreme depression with a damaged brain and feeling like this is my new reality and this is like the way I can't ever remember feeling good. I don't know what it's like to feel good. I don't remember. And so that kind of stuff can still creep in. Even as I wake up now, I have so many memories still of that feeling that you still have to get into like a new habit of reminding yourself this is who I am now and shifting back into that state of being. And it's a powerful thing, but our egos are powerful too, and our ego just knows that, hey, but you were alive back then and I know how to keep you safe, and like you weren't
Mhm.
doing anything risky back then. And it's so powerful. When you
I
were
could
shifting from teaching and you decided you wanted to stop complaining and you wanted to start creating the life that you have now, what were some of the like monsters that popped up for you, mindset monsters? And then what did you do to kind of whack-a-mole them back down and keep going?
I think the biggest one that came up for me was, well, who am I to think that I could do X, Y, and Z? Or who would want to hear from me? I'm just a girl from a really small town in Illinois. Like, why would anybody even care what I have to say? And so I think, kind of how similar to what you said about the box, I think I had pushed myself down and made myself small for so long and put everybody else's interests and needs and stuff like that as a priority higher than mine. That when I finally realized, okay, I'm ready to step out and do something, or okay, I want to do something, it was like I had squished myself into this ball that was so tiny and that was so much smaller than any kind of space I could fit in. I had pressed it down so much that as I started to kind of expand, it felt uncomfortable and it felt scary and it felt like I don't belong here and I have no right even trying to do any of this. Another one that, and that one I I guess I just started talking about stuff, started talking about what I wanted to do, what I was doing. And when people started to reply to me and say things like, this was really helpful, or this really made a difference for me, that's when it started to click for me that, okay, there's more that I could do here than what I'm doing right now, as long as I can put my voice out there. And I actually, I remember an email we got when I was working with you, Caitlin, and it was from somebody that they were in a really, really bad place, like suicidal kind of place. And an email that we had sent made an impact on them to the point that like it literally saved their life. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to think what I'm saying isn't making a difference, what I'm doing isn't making a difference, but there's people that really need to hear what we have to say, like really, really, really need it. And if we don't say those things, what if somebody else also says, I'm not going to say something because nobody needs to hear what I have to say? So that kind of opened it up for me. I think the other big thing was, what will people think? That was another question that would pop up for me a lot of, what would people think if I started putting myself out there? They'll be like, oh, Brittany, like make fun of me or something like that. And that really only happened twice that I can remember. But this fear of it really held me back for a while. One time somebody said that to my face. They were like laughing at me and what I was doing, working, remotely. And then a few months later, they were like, hey, how do I do that too? And so after that happened, I was like, okay, I'm not even going to pay attention to what I think other people might think, because eventually they're going to ask me how I'm doing it anyway. So I may as well just go for it. And then also there's a Billie Eilish quote that really impacted me. She said something like, everybody's going to die, nobody cares, just go for it, something along those idea. And I thought, you know what, that's true. Like nobody's going to remember me 100 years from now, but maybe somebody living right now with me, like maybe I can impact them, maybe I can have a difference with what's happening in the world right now. And so I think those things help me kind of get past it.
Yeah, wow, that's really powerful. And it sounds like what you've been doing is sharing what would have resonated with past Brittany. Like you're speaking the language that past Brittany would be like, oh, and that's exactly what, what I'm doing with self-transformation school is translating the stuff that I've learned now the hard way into the language that me 10 years ago, who was afraid to start anything, or wait, it'll be 10 years this fall that I started Proofread Anywhere. And
Wow.
if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be here now talking to you in a van that I designed myself outside of a house that I designed myself that's making me thousands of dollars just renting it every month while I get to do whatever I want and build whatever I want and not have to like run it by a husband anymore, like I just love that, I wouldn't have believed it though. I would have been like, oh, I'll like laugh at you, that kind of person. But that small version of me is now who I'm talking to. A lot of the times I'm like, what did that person need to hear? The person who is maybe down on themselves, or it's just like, yeah, right, or must be nice, that kind of almost an apathetic way of thinking because they're so resigned to the struggle. They're so resigned to it's gonna be hard, and it has to be hard for it to be successful. Like you have to grind for it to be hard. I used to think that. I know you used to think that too. Like we were both workaholics, and it only leads to one place, and that's burnout. It's just not, and it's not worth it. And I think it's because we were telling ourselves a story. We had some kind of belief that if we weren't working, then we weren't worthy. And
100% I believe that. Yeah.
I did too. I did too. I was very much raised with like a performance mindset. I was going to get in trouble if I didn't get straight A's, and that's why I got good grades, and not because I gave a crap about what I was learning, or none of it was really important to me. I was just like, I got to get good grades because mom's going to be mad if I don't, It's how I grew up. But I can see now that life is not about that. It's not about performance. It's not about productivity either. It does feel good to be productive, but what's the intention behind the productivity? Is it to feel good about yourself? Or is it because you're in a joyful state of creation and you are not under any stress, which is kind of, it's kind of hard. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about stress too, because like there is so much, there can be so much stress, especially in a society that trains us to believe certain things that aren't true. So we went to college, we went to school, we were trained how to be cogs in the wheel. Like we were not set up for success, we were actually set up for failure, but we believed it was supposed to be success. And so we have all this, we have a lot of handicaps, I guess. And so how do you move past those limiting beliefs? What are some specific steps that you've taken that you can recall moving past those limiting beliefs and creating new beliefs that, or telling yourself new stories to replace those old ones that were keeping us in that burnout cycle.
I think the first thing that I did was to acknowledge anytime one of those limiting beliefs would come up, to start to recognize it and acknowledge it. That was hard at first because I didn't even know a lot of those thoughts that were coming up, they would just automatically pop up. I didn't even realize I was having limiting beliefs for a long time. I read a book called The Compound Effect, and that was the first book that first time I really realized I could take responsibility for a lot of my life. And that was when I started to take responsibility for the thoughts that were coming in. And so anytime a thought would pop up that I recognize as a limiting thought, which I would write down, here's some of the limiting thoughts that I'm having, so that I didn't have to think, is this a limiting one or not? I already, had written them down. So I'd write them down, and then I'd recognize them once they started to come in, and I would say, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Here's why it's not true. Here's what I want to think instead. And it felt like a really long process. It felt tedious at first. It felt like I probably sound like super goofy, being like, all right, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I want to think. But it really helped me. And so just recognizing some of those things, and then acknowledging that that's my old thought. That thought was keeping me safe for a long time. I really appreciate that my brain wants to keep me safe, but that's not the safety that I want anymore. What I want is, and I would think about what it is, like the kind of life that I wanted, which at first was, my only goal was like, I want to work at home and I want to have my dogs near me. That was my only goal. And it felt so impossible, so far away. And then it happened, and I was like, what else could I do? And so, but yeah, I think that's the first thing, is recognizing the ones that are coming up for you, acknowledging them, and then thinking, all right, what do I want to think instead? And continuing to do that until the new thoughts started to replace the old thoughts.
Yeah, that's really powerful because that awareness can really set us free, I think. Because
Mm-hmm.
we're on autopilot. We've been programmed with all these thoughts that I'm not good enough, or I could never do that, or that's not for someone like me, or I'm always going to struggle, or work is supposed to be hard, or it wouldn't be work, it can't be fun. Those kinds of beliefs, and they're just not true. But they run on so much like autopilot. And you were talking about how your brain, and I like to call it the ego, which so many of us, myself included, for so long I was not aware that the ego was even there. I thought the ego was me. And so the voice that would pop up that's just trying to keep you safe, that is completely operating from the past. All it knows is what's happened in the past. And it's like such a small sliver of what's possible for us. Like, okay, well, that hasn't worked for you in the past. So you should definitely not do it now, because it's definitely not going to work. But the ego has absolutely no way of really knowing that. It's just trying to keep you safe based on what has not worked or what has worked in the past. Like, hey, we know that you're going to stay alive if you keep doing this. But it can also work in a backwards way, because if we're stuck in like an unhealthy pattern that has us like with illnesses like burnout, for example, like something's got to give. But I think that then that can evolve into more of the mental health issues like I've personally experienced, where you're completely disconnected from yourself, including your ego, and you're just kind of just like a floating orb, I guess is the way I would describe it. Just like disconnected from yourself, disconnected from everybody, disconnected from reality. Sometimes, it could be really bad if you're not tuned in and connected to your inner self and listening to yourself. And that even means listening to yourself when you're complaining. So like that awareness that you had back in the day when you're realized like, oh my gosh, I'm just complaining. And if I took that same energy of complaining and shifted that energy towards looking for a solution, and that's something that we teach in self-transformation school too, in the transform curriculum, actually, which our first retreat is going to be happening next month, which I'm really excited about, that we can't see certain opportunities that are already there. Like the opportunities, and the whole thing with manifesting, I don't want to say that it's all BS, right? But I feel like there's a lot of people that act like it's magic. Like you can manifest things to just appear in your reality. But the truth is the opportunities are already there. And you'll see once you shift out of that lower vibe energy of the complaining, the victimization of self, like I'm a victim of myself, I'm a victim of my circumstances, I'm angry at myself, angry at the world, like those low catabolic energy states that literally pull and create catabolic hormones in your body and your brain. It sends you into this like dust cloud where you can't see the opportunities that are around you. So the opportunities are there, but you have to let the dust settle so you can see them. And people don't realize that there's so much energy being taken from them when they're in those energy states, and that's why they feel so exhausted all the time. So that's the goal, is sharing your story. And the work that I'm doing now is to help people turn on the light, that they have a choice in where they're putting their energy, but it starts with that awareness.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I learned from you was that idea that I could spend the same energy doing something else. And that was eye-opening. That it made me go from being like, I don't have time to do anything else to, all right, well, I am spending 45 minutes a day complaining. So why not, use that instead for something else? Even if it was just, even if I didn't take any tangible action, even if I was just working on my mindset only and changing how I was thinking about the situation I was in. For example, with teaching, at first I was like, "Oh man, I don't have any time or energy for anything else. This is so frustrating." And then when I started to shift my thoughts, I was like, "All right, this is basically my sugar daddy paying me to be able to fund my dreams. Like because I'm doing this job, I have the money coming in that I can invest in something. I can invest in a mindset course, and otherwise I wouldn't be able to. So this is providing the means for me to invest in a mindset course so that I'm not in the same position a year from now." And that was huge.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us about what position you're in now, because you're not in teaching anymore.
Yeah,
That's
no,
your life is like you just
no.
had your first six-figure launch. I don't know if you wanted that out in the open, but I was just blown away by that and so excited for you. I mean, to go from being really mad at the world and being underpaid as a teacher, which everybody, it's like no secret, everybody's underpaid who's a teacher, which is the truth, to having a six-figure product launch. And it's been what, 10, 12 years? Like, that's amazing. And you're a completely different person. So tell us more about where you are now.
Okay, so let's see. I had started with being in teaching, being miserable, not knowing what I wanted to do. And now I've tried a lot of different things along the way, but now I have a program I really love delivering. I really love everybody I get to work with. I work, 5, 6 hours a day, Monday through Thursday, sometimes more, sometimes less, but usually around that. I don't work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We just hang out with family. I am not constantly on my phone. I'm not stressed about checking my phone or on my, I'm not getting angry emails from parents. I'm like, yeah. So all of that, we had a six-figure launch on our recent launch, which if you had told me that 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I would have laughed for sure. I'm like, are you sure you have the right name? Like, are you sure it's me that you're talking to? So, but I mean, I just get to spend so much of my day doing exactly what I want and helping exactly who I want to help and feeling like I'm making a difference and feeling really proud of the example I'm setting for my daughter of, you can do anything that you want and also you can make as much as you want and also you don't have to be burned out doing it and also you know what I mean, like there's all these and alsos that I get to show her and she doesn't, I mean, she's too young now to understand a lot of that, but as we continue to grow, she'll get to see that more and more. And we have more options now. Like we're looking at getting our first rental property. We're looking at, having all these things and all these options that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And now she'll also get to have options that she wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's like night and day. I feel like the person that I was, I mean, I'm so thankful for her because if she hadn't taken action, if she hadn't worked on her mindset, I would still be teaching 100%. Like if I hadn't worked through my mindset stuff, I would 100% still be teaching, still complaining about it, still living for the weekends, still living for summer break, still, barely making ends meet. And so to think that I mean, it's about a decade, yeah, maybe a little bit less, but it feels so long from there. It feels so different from there and also so short at the same time. But when you're in it, it feels like it's so long and it's so hard to get through. And it's like you're trying to hike up a mountain through sand. But then when you look back on it, you're like, wow, I'm glad that I hiked up that mountain through sand because now it feels easy and fun.
Yeah, that you make up a really important point that it does get easier. It's like it's mental training and it's just like physical training that the thing it doesn't get any easier. You just get better so it feels easier and it feels better. And you also mentioned that you have been teaching your daughter and living it by example that you can make as much money as you want and you don't have to burn yourself out doing it. And I wanted to touch on the mindsets that are often underneath this belief that we have to work super, super hard. We have to like hustle, the hustle and grind culture, which is so toxic, I think. And I don't even want to say I think, I know from my personal experience and from other people that I've shared this with and had conversations with. And you can tell me if you agree that it comes from a fear and lack mentality and belief that we're going to be left behind, that there's not enough for us, that like it's a complete opposite of the abundance mentality that what's ours is ours and that's going to happen no matter what. And we're just getting to watch it unfold and there's no need to rush. because the whole point is enjoying the journey, and you're already living your dream life. You're working, and you've created this life. You're doing exactly what you love to do. Just relax, right? Enjoy it. It doesn't, you don't have to worry about getting to the finish line. But that's, I think, another mindset that's programmed into us by society, is like achievement and goals. And but that goalpost is always, it's like a carrot. It's like we're just being led over a cliff, basically, of
Mhm.
racing our lives, not really being present because we're always trying to get someplace else. And that is kind of connected to this belief that I've experienced and have felt from other people as well, that, oh, I don't have enough time, or it's going to take too long. But the time's going to pass anyway. So how do you want to spend that time? How do you want to feel? What do you want to put your energy towards? And what you put your energy towards is always going to multiply. You're going to get more of what you focus on. So if we're focusing on what we don't want, we're just going to get more of that. We're going to perpetuate that. But if we're focusing on what we do want and what steps we need to take to get there, and creating that, envisioning that, imagining that, all that stuff, the universe, the energy, the source energy of which all things were made. Like, we're all made out of the same stuff. We're all connected in this weird fabric, the ether, I guess. It kind of works where it just makes that real for you. So this whole thoughts become things mentality that I used to think was just BS 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was like, reality is just reality. Like, don't you see that? Like, this, it's like this over here, it's like that over here, and like things are just, they are the way they are. But that's just because the way I was seeing it. And I'll never forget the way it felt when I realized that we're all viewing life through a lens. What was that
Mhm.
like for you?
Confusing at first because I thought things just are what they are. And then I started to realize that people thought differently than I did, which to some of the people listening might be like an obvious statement. But for me, especially growing up in like a smaller town, a lot of times you're in kind of an echo chamber, and a lot of people think the same things that you think and say the same things that you say. And even now, I mean, we have less of an echo chamber because we're on social, but also maybe more one because of the algorithm and stuff like that. And so I find that a lot of times we kind of move to the people that are thinking the same way that we are, and whatnot. But once you start to see that there are different ways of thinking, and some people think completely differently about the same situation. You both experience the same situation, like it happened just now. You think one thing, they think one thing. It opened my mind up to, I don't have to necessarily think the way that I'm thinking. I don't have to live in the reality I'm living in. I could live in one that I like better. And so I started doing that. And actually, Caitlin, I learned this from you. You said something along the lines of, consider a situation that happened that upset you. And I want you to pretend like you're just watching it happen on a video camera. You can't hear anything. All you can see is literally what you can see, and that's it. And when I started to think about situations that bothered me or upset me, or that I was like dwelling on through that lens, I was like, wow, okay, I'm applying a lot of emotion or a lot of fear or a lot of whatever to this situation that may or may not have happened. And even if it did, I could choose to decide that it didn't and just move on instead of dwelling on it. And that was a huge impact for me. Instead of spending all this energy and time thinking about somebody that didn't like me, somebody that was upset with me, all these other things, I just thought, okay, here's what happened exactly. Okay. And I was able to move on a lot faster instead of spending all that energy and time thinking about or being frustrated about a situation. So that was really helpful for me.
Wow, I'm glad to hear that. You're right. It takes us applying meaning. So we feel these emotions in
Mhm.
our body that come from having thoughts, right? And our thoughts emanate from the beliefs that we have that we are probably not even aware of most of the time. Those lead to feelings, and we believe that those feelings are reality. So we take action based on those feelings, not understanding that we're ascribing meaning when we take action. And that changes everything when you decide, like, oh, am I feeling anxiety or am I feeling excitement? Like, I feel the exact same sensations in my body when I feel anxiety as I do excitement. But I just have to ask myself, okay, what kind of thoughts am I thinking? Am I deciding that I'm anxious about whatever task I'm doing? Am I telling myself old stories like, oh, this is going to be really hard, instead of just opening up my laptop and starting to write, whatever it is? If I'm working on some new content, am I telling myself the story that I don't know what to say, or I won't be able to organize it the right way, or I'll just blather on and on, like I can't do it very well, it's going to take forever? Like, what old story am I telling myself that's giving me that feeling? and let me just shut that down. Let me make that, oh, I'm excited to write. Let me just open up the page and just start writing and see what happens. Like, have some faith in yourself, because I didn't I didn't have a lot of faith in myself for a long time. I was making up all these stories and telling myself that it was just wasn't possible. And based on that belief, I was right. But because I
Mhm.
changed that belief, and when I did change that belief, everything changed. And that seems to be very obviously what happened in your life as well. You decided to believe something different when you became aware that you were believing something that was keeping you stuck. And now your life has completely transformed.
Yeah, it's wild. I started also to tell myself, like, when I would think about what I want, even now when I think about what I want, I really try to go for it on my goals and stuff. I mean, for me back then, going for it was like the most amazing thing, to be able to work from home with my dogs by my side. Like, that was the most incredible thing. And that felt like impossible. It felt like a stretch. And now, because I know that that was possible when I thought it was impossible, I think, what else could be possible for me that feels impossible right now? So when I look at what do I want right now? I think there's a lot of things that I want right now that I can have right now. So I just get them and I go after them. Like taking Fridays off, for example, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to hate me. Nobody's going to want to work with me. And it wasn't that at all. In fact, I get a lot of, because I have it on my out of office reply that says something like, you won't be able to reach me through email, pigeon carrier, text, anything on Fridays because I'm not in on Fridays. I'm with my family. And I get more emails responding to that, being like, oh, I love that. Goals. This is what I want to do. And so people aren't mad. They think it's awesome. But the things that seem impossible now, I still write them down and I think, cool, I wonder what path it'll take to get to there and what that'll look like. And I feel excited about it. But I think changing what you believe is possible for yourself is a huge part of it. And now that I think there's very few limitations on me, there's so much more that's opened up, so much more that's been possible. And it's been possible the entire time. It's been there and available the entire time. I just didn't see it for myself until, later on. And it's like, I like to explain it like it's the stars in the universe. So right now, when you go outside on like a clear night, you can see certain stars, but there's always way more there than we can see. And with the James Webb Deep Space Telescope, we're able to see more and more of those stars that we couldn't see before. And so it's like that, where there's so much that's possible, but we look at our life and we think what's possible based on our past, based on what we can see, based on what we see from others. But there's so much beyond that that we just haven't tapped into yet, that is there. It's there already. It's not changing. It's not moving. It's there. It's just, waiting for us.
Yeah, and the fog will clear. The fog will clear. I
Mhm.
can't say that enough, that like that catabolic, and it's catabolic or an anabolic energy. So the catabolic is destructive, it's sucking you dry. It's why you feel like you're having your soul sucked out of you when you're at a job that you hate and you're complaining about it all the time. It's because you're literally with those emotions, with that energy, your body is creating catabolic hormones that are breaking you down. And that's why you feel fatigued. That's why it can lead to burnout. So it's a physical thing, and I feel like that's missing from a lot of mindset coaching, which is like why I'm doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it now, is bridging that gap, because you can't just change your thoughts if you don't have the awareness of why you have the thoughts that you have, and if your brain is not getting the resources it needs to be able to think clearly and accurately. It's just such a huge part of it. And then those catabolic hormones become anabolic hormones. So you get like the endorphins and the dopamine and all the feel good hormones that actually give you energy and make you more productive and allow you to see opportunities that are around you, because you're not so busy telling yourself, no, I have no opportunities. It's just wild. It's wild and it feels like magic. And I think that's why there are a lot of people who are kind of into the woo woo manifestation stuff, but I've never been really into that woo woo stuff. I've always been a very practical person. Not that I was never a science teacher, but I love the practical aspects of it. And that's why I like analogies. Life is like or mindset is like looking through a lens. It's like changing the channel on a radio. The practical way of looking at things can shift everything. So it's not like, oh, let me just manifest into existence this thing that didn't exist before. It's no, like, let's figure out what's causing you to not be able to see it, and that will change everything.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So, Brittany, I just want to say thank you again for being here. What parting words would you want to share about your journey, about what you're doing now, what lights you up, where you're going next, things you're excited about. What would you like to share?
I'm using new tools like AI, for example, to spend a lot less time doing mundane tasks that I don't necessarily love. And so, one of the really cool parts with that is that I feel like so much of my day is just stuff that I really love doing because a lot of that other stuff can be taken over by AI in a good way. Like it can help us with that. So, that's probably what I'm most excited about right now is those opportunities and seeing all the ways that I can have AI help me and how it can help other folks. And then as far as parting words, and Caitlin didn't ask me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would say if you are considering working with her in any capacity, I'd highly recommend it. The impact that she's had on my life and my family's life and my kids' life, even before she was born, has been incredible, like truly life changing, life transforming for me. And I can say that I wouldn't be here in the same capacity that I am now without her influence and without her help. And I'm just so grateful, Caitlin, for you and for everything that you've taught me throughout the years about mindset and about business. And yeah, I'm just super grateful. So anybody considering working with her, I would definitely recommend it. It has made a huge impact on my life, and I'm very certain it will on yours also.
Oh, thank you. I'm gonna cry now. But I feel the same way about you. I mean, many people watching know that Brittany and I work together, and what a lot of people probably don't know is that when I was in the worst state of my life, like I've mentioned during this interview that we're doing right now, when I was in the worst phase of burnout after I got divorced, when my brain was completely depleted, I was thinking the absolute worst thoughts that I've ever thought in my life. And I used to not understand why anybody would ever want to kill themselves until I did want to kill myself because I couldn't imagine what it would feel like to feel like that, like dead for the rest of my life. I was like, this is not being alive. And Brittany was there for all of it. Like she was there for so much. Like I was there for all of it. But Brittany, you were there for so much of that. And I can't thank you enough for being there for me too. So thank you. You've changed my life as well.
Now I'm gonna cry. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We both, I know, hope this was so impactful and helpful to you for shedding light on where you are in your life, knowing that transformation is completely possible and it doesn't take an outside source at all because it all starts from within here. And that's how it lasts too, right? We can seek outward help. We can go to doctors. We can go to the gym. We can go and take a program to learn how to do X, Y, and Z and change what we do. But until we change who we are on the inside, which is what's impacting what we do in the first place, nothing's going to last. The change isn't going to last. But if we can start from the inside and understand that we can believe what we want about ourselves and we understand that we can change what we believe about ourselves, that will shift everything. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you inside Self Transformation School. I love you. Bye bye.